maybe give them a call. But before we do that, we've got some business to do. We just need to put that here. Put this here. I'm up to episode 5 in the wire. Episode 5 in the wire. Just downloaded number 6 as we speak. It's no bad. By the end of day 3, I'll have watched about... When did I start? It was that Monday, just a couple of days ago. So end of the week, I'll have watched the full first series of The Wire, probably. I'll go into the second series. Just 5 series, isn't there? Oof. Right. Stay there, I've just got to do a bit more housekeeping. No, we don't want to Skype number, we want to Skype ID. So, tell 10 to tell 10, what's been happening out there? I don't look at, I don't read the news. Mainstream media can suck my bobby. I don't give a flying monkeys about it. Unless it's something to do with Celtic, obviously. Right, so we've got that number here. Right, so we're good to go. Somebody phoned me earlier on, so we're going to give this wee person a call. Somebody phoned, when was that? Aye? Off. Hold on, who was this? Am I mistaken, it wasn't? When was the call from? Today. Aye. Who was it? Who phoned? Come on, fess up. Right, I don't know who it was, I've lost it now. Ah, well, away and fling shit to the moon. Right, listen, this crackpot phoned me earlier on, he's been phoning me, I need to give him a phone. See what he's saying about it. Get him on for a few minutes. It's always good to get somebody as mad as a brush, madder than me. And who else could I find but the Bulgy in here. Stay there a minute. Right, number's 0141 416 1888 as always.
Hello?
Jonathan.
Hello, Tommy, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, mate. We're going live to the planet. What are you saying about it?
Well, what would you like to talk about?
You tell me what's on the agenda.
Rothschilds, NSA, Kennedy.
Oh, spare me the Kennedy chat now. Save that for next week. What about what's the latest in the Rothschild? Have they handed themselves into a police station for their crimes against humanity?
No, but some very interesting stories on the origins of the Rothschilds and what they've been up to over the past 400 years or so.
And hit me with it. Give me the abbreviated crackpot version in 30 seconds. Go.
The Rothschilds marry into royalty. The Rockefellers are a Rothschild bloodline. Hitler and Churchill were Rothschilds. Even the Star of David is actually a Rothschild symbol. And the word itself, Rothschild, means red sign. And the red sign was a red version of the Star of David.
Brilliant. You can't get any more succinct than that. The interesting part of the Rothschild dynasty, Hitler and Churchill. Pray tell
Yes.
us more. Hitler was an illegitimate grandson of a Rothschild. Would you go along with that basis?
Yes. His grandmother was a maid in one of the Rothschild chateaus or country homes. As for Churchill, his mother, who also had an affair with Edward VII, future king, Prince of Wales as he was known at the time, Churchill's mother was a Rothschild, and and according to the Rothschild and their rather self-serving definition of Jewishness, considered Churchill a Jew and a Rothschild. And the Rothschilds can trace their origins back to Georgia in the Caucasus, where a certain Joseph Dugashvili came from.
Oh, Uncle Joe Stalin?
Yeah, Uncle Joe Stalin. So it turns out that, yes, Stalin is probably distantly related to the Rothschilds as well.
Yeah, well, the
as
Bolshevik
well as
Revolution was the Bolshevik Revolution was probably a Rothschild orchestrated coup. But hey, c'est la vie. Let's not split hairs here. Carry on.
It was. There's lots of documentary proof that the Rothschilds funded the Bolshevik Revolution to gain revenge against the Tsar and his family, because just over 100 years earlier, at the Congress of Vienna, or I forget where, the Tsar prevented the Rothschilds from establishing a one-world government as early as 1815, because the Tsar was the only political leader in Europe at the time that wasn't in debt to the Rothschilds. The French were in debt, the British were in debt, the Austrians were in debt, everyone was in debt but the Tsar. And the Tsar prevented a world government as early as 1815, and the Rothschilds vowed not only revenge against the Tsar, but his entire family would be wiped out. And that's why they instructed Lenin and his cronies to not just kill the Tsar who had abdicated, but eliminate his entire bloodline.
And indeed, it wouldn't be a full one world government, because they had to overcome the Ottoman Empire, which they didn't manage that for a good another 100 years after that. But with same scenario, they bankrupted the corrupt Khedive, and it was a fait accompli that the Turkish Ottoman Empire would eventually fall. The Islamic Caliphate ended in 1924, and in the same year, Britain, I think it was Lloyd George, whoever it was, whatever politician, held up a Quran and said, you know, well, this book will never be allowed to dominate us again. And they had what they called the Arab Facade. So, yeah, the one world government. And coincidentally, Jonathan, the one world government that was formulated through the Federal Reserve in Jekyll Island is coming up for the 100th anniversary. I don't know if you know that, where they managed to rush
and
this
it's
through.
being renewed.
And it's been renewed. It's been
Actually, the Federal Reserve isn't the first Rothschild-owned bank in America. There were two previously, and the first one was set up shortly after the American Revolution by Andrew Hamilton. And then there was a 20-year charter for that bank, but the Americans decided that the Rothschilds were not acting in America's best interests, so they didn't renew the tender on the first bank, the United States, and the Rothschilds vowed to a terrible revenge against America in 1811. And the following year was the War of 1812, when the British Navy burnt down the residence of the President of the United States, hence the term White House, because the burnt-out remains were painted white to cover up the scorch marks. The war went on for 4 years, and the aim of the War of 1812 wasn't necessarily to overthrow the American government, but to bankrupt the American government so that it would be forced to capitulate to the Rothschilds' demands for a reserve bank in the United States, which the Americans acquiesced to begrudgingly in 1816. 20 years later, Andrew Jackson, after a long campaign, managed to shut down the second bank of the United States, despite Rothschild agents being sent to assassinate him and failing. But these assassins were never brought to justice because the Rothschilds used their influence to protect the assassins. Andrew Jackson referred to the Rothschilds as a nest of vipers that were bleeding the nations of the world dry. So after that, the Rothschilds took the gloves off. They sent some of their own in-laws and relatives over to America to look after their financial interests. They started buying up huge shares in railroad companies and other infrastructure groups. So if they couldn't control the money supply, they would control America's infrastructure. And Woodrow Wilson was eventually blackmailed into setting up the Federal Reserve after he was elected President of the United States by a Rothschild agent who told him that unless he paid $40,000 to one of his former mistresses, this former mistress would spill the details on their illicit relationship when he was a university professor. However, this Rothschild agent disingenuously said, I will pay that $40,000 bribe in exchange for you giving me power of veto over your next Supreme Court justice appointment, which he subsequently did, and helped and used his leverage against Wilson to set up the Federal Reserve.
And all that can be corroborated in two wonderful films. Is it The Moneymakers? And then is it Return to Oz? Or whatever it was. It's like one of the... I think somebody can correct us on it, but all that information that you just gave there so eloquently, Jonathan, it can be corroborated. And
there's more, because apparently there were two almost identical runs on the pound orchestrated by the Rothschilds, one in the early 1830s and the other one in 1992, and it gives a whole new insight into Norman Lamont's memoirs, because if you remember, in his memoirs he said when Britain was forced out of the ERM, which is the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, for those who don't know, he sang in the bath. But it turns out the reason he was singing in the bath wasn't because Britain was out of the ERM and that he was a Eurosceptic. No, it was because before he had been in government, Norman Lamont had been a senior member of the British branch of the Rothschild Bank. And after he left number 11 Downing Street, he returned to his post at the Rothschilds UK Bank. So Norman Lamont is a Rothschild agent who orchestrated a run on the pound in 1992 in cahoots with George Soros.
You're some man. You're heavier than a bag of sand, fucking fully laid down with wet pish. You're heavier than anything, John, and this is just heavy shit you're giving us here. Fucking hell. Anyway, give me something light, because I mean, My huge crush with this, Jonathan. You're fucking, you're some man. God bless